Hey guys, this is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline, and today I'm doing Comic Uno episode 176. In this show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show, and so we go worst pick of the week to best pick of the week, and I had a couple more than my average. It was about 23 comics that I read this week. So, number 23, my worst pick of the week for this week was the Mighty Thor issue 14. I love this series, but I just don't really like the current arc that's going on. The artwork did change a bit. I do like Doderman's artwork a bit more. I feel like this is darker and not showing as much detail as the other art style. So, it's not bad art, just not my particular thing. But really, it's because of the story. I'm just not really interested in this war between the elves that much. And I feel like there's just so much going on. Now, it's not really a character-driven issue, which I like particularly a little bit more, just because I don't really care about the Norse world too much, and that's why I never was so interested in Thor, but I like Jane more. So it just was more of a personal preference. I didn't like this issue. So I'm going to give this 2 stars, and we'll see what happens once the war actually does start. So, moving on to number 22, which is a book I don't know if I want to get more of, and I was kind of misled here because the solicit said Pepper Potts was going to be in this issue, and she wasn't, and that is Infamous Iron Man issue 3, where, again, this is more personal preference than anything. It's not a bad issue. The art is good. You know, I especially like the pages in the middle where we got to learn a little bit more about Secret Wars. Let me see if I could find those pages for you. Like, I really like that they didn't color it. It was just pencils. The art's good, but the story I just can't get into. I just don't buy Dr. Doom as Iron Man. And I think some of his reasonings for becoming Iron Man are kind of not vague, but not really... I'm not convinced by it. So... he's like, oh, I want to be all powerful. So, I looked up to Iron Man. I'm Iron Man now. And then I don't really like how they're using Tony's last love interest. I liked her character before, but now her just like following Dr. Doom is weird. And then Thing story's okay. Again, I just don't feel a real connection to the story. So we'll see if I want to get more. I just not convinced by him wanting to be Iron Man right now. So, we'll see. I might drop it, though. So, Infamous Iron Man issue 3 gets 2 stars, and that is number 22. Moving on to number 21, this issue was just a little disappointing towards the end, and also because of the artwork, but Deathstroke issue 9, a book I usually love. It's just kind of fumbled here. The artwork was very simple. I mean, it wasn't bad, but usually it's more detailed than this. Even the backgrounds felt very simple. There wasn't much detail. Let me try to find the page. Like this. It's just like very simple background. So I just wanted a little bit more from the artwork. And then I felt like a lot of the stories didn't really move too much. Like, I liked Joey's story, but it didn't progress too much. I liked Rose's story, but there wasn't a lot of pages there. And then once we got to Deathstroke, which was half the issue, I wasn't really interested in his war stories. So I gave Deathstroke issue 9 2.5 stars. Not a bad issue, but I've read better from Deathstroke. Alright, so now we're moving on to number 20. Sad to see this so low, but Superpowers issue 2. I just don't feel invested to this story as much, and it wasn't as fun as the other, like, Tiny Titan stuff. I don't like that's an overarching story. I feel like it would be better if it's just focusing on Flash this issue, the next issue focusing on Batman. I think it takes some stuff away because you're focusing on Clark's mother having a Brainiac baby. But, I mean, there's still some fun parts, like, you got Wonder Woman flying the invisible jet and stuff. I just kind of read better from this creative team for my personal preference. So, Superpowers issue 2 gets 2.5 stars. Now moving on to number 19, a book that I feel like has just lasted too long, and that is Grimm issue 4. And I like this book because we get to see Juliet's side of the story, but I think the other Hexen Beasts aren't as strong, and I kind of wish it would focus more on Juliet as a Hexen Beast dealing with these powers. It is just more referenced, and they're dealing more with, hey, there's other Hexen Beasts, and that story I feel like isn't as strong as Juliet, I guess, coming of her powers. Also, the artwork is kind of Barbie dollish, which is weird. I don't think it really fits the tone of this book, which should be a little bit grittier. So Grimm issue 4 gets 2.5 stars. We'll see if I continue this book. So now moving on to number, I think, 18, right? We're up to number 18, which is Action Comics, issue 970. And this book, I thought improved a little bit from last issue. Last issue was just really bored. But this issue, you know, you're getting the story of like, all right, this guy had a family. It was, you know, his family was killed by Darkseid, and now he's seeing that Lex is going to be the next Darkseid. And now Clark listens to the story, and Clark's like, all right, you're guilty, or what do you want to do? So it's still, like, I feel like they're trying to make us care for this villain, and I still don't really care about him. A lot of exposition-heavy stuff here, and the story is not a lot going on in the issue, but I like the artwork. It's just not my favorite arc for Action Comics, but we'll see. Action Comics issue 970 gets 2.5 stars. So moving on to number 17, which I felt just was a filler issue, and that was Robin Hood, I Love New York, issue 7. It's just a pure team-up between Robin Hood and Van Helsing, and I'm not a big fan of Van Helsing, but I liked kind of the calls to New York City. I thought that was cool, and they actually used the setting of New York City and even Staten Island. I thought that was cool. Artwork's not bad. It's pretty good. I like the artwork. Yeah, it's just got a forgettable issue, though, so that's the most I could say about it. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Just kind of a forgettable issue of Robin Hood. Alright, moving on to number 17, which is Justice League vs. Suicide Squad issue 2, which I thought was a bit of an improvement from issue 1, but still it's just a generic fighting issue, but you get a little bit of character story between, you know, Killer Frost, Deadshot. You learn a little bit about the characters if you don't know them, and then, you know, everyone hates Amanda Waller. That's pretty much the big story. But I like the ending where Amanda Waller is like making the Justice League become her Suicide Squad, so I thought that was cool. And the artwork's good. I don't think it's Ivan Reyes, but it's a very similar style, so I liked it. Did it blow me away? No. Do I still think this is a necessary arc yet? No. But I got a little bit more from this issue, so I'm going to give it 2.5 stars, and that was number 16. Now moving on to above 2.5 stars, and that is number 15, which is Wonder Woman, issue 13, which I totally want to be higher, and it would have been if it wasn't for the artwork. I just did not like the art. Felt like our characters looked really skinny, and I felt like Steve looked sick in a lot of them. He looked really pale, and Wonder Woman's supposed to, like, kind of look a little sickly because she's dealing with a lot. But yeah, I did not like the artwork for this book, and I thought the colors that usually work with Liam Sharp didn't really work here. So it was mostly because of the artwork. Also because it's very much in the point of view of Steve, which I liked, but it was a little bit of a slower issue too. But I do like that you're seeing the shock of Wonder Woman and Steve just trying to help her get through this. So I like the story, but the art really took it down for me. So Wonder Woman issue 13 gets 3 stars. Now moving on to number 14, which I am so torn on this book. I really don't know what to think about it. I was going to do an in-depth review, but I thought maybe I'll just talk about it here, and that's Detective Comics issue 947. So this is a big Stephanie issue, and I am a huge Stephanie Brown fan. She's literally one of my favorite characters of all time, and I am so torn with this book, because in this issue we get to see Stephanie stand up to Batman and say, you're doing it wrong. Heroes shouldn't exist in Gotham. We need to protect the people by not destroying, you know, buildings and fighting these villains all the time. She wants to be a hero in a different way. Okay. And she kind of, like, attacks her friends because of it. And it's mostly because of grief. You can tell it's just she has not grieved for Tim, and that's why she's overreacting about this. And Batman even says, hey, you know what, let her do what she needs to do, and she'll come back, or I think she's harmless, pretty much. And Batman was like, all right, but do we continue to do this? He's like, yeah, you know, we just have to put things into perspective because we've learned a little bit from this. And then you do have an interesting cliffhanger with Tim trying to get out of the whole thing he's captured by and can't. So hopefully that will pay off in some arc. But Stephanie fan, there's aspects I really liked about this. You know, she's able to defeat half her team. That's pretty cool. I thought that was interesting, that showing that Stephanie is a stronger character than people believe. Her standing up for something is very much Stephanie's character. Her standing up to Batman. She's done it a lot. She's probably one of the only characters that can. She's slapped Batman in the face before, and Batman's taken it. So I like that. The actual motives is what I don't like. You know, I don't think Stephanie saying, oh, you know, I hate heroes, and her dressed up as Spoiler trying to spoil people's plans. You know, I've always liked the name. She's always tried to spoil people's plans, but not in that way. You know, Stephanie's journey, she's always wanted to be a hero, even though when people told her not to. That was always her story. So it's kind of weird to see this reverse of her stepping away from the costume and saying, no, being a hero is not what I want. It's not what you want either. So it's kind of weird to see that from Stephanie. So that's why I don't like it. And also, it goes back to some of the haunted periods of Stephanie's life, which is Stephanie dying because of Tim. Because she was Robyn. She made a lot of mistakes then. So I feel like a lot of the ideas she has is driven by Tim's idea of, hey, I want to be a normal kid again. Like, I want to step away from all this. So I feel like it's her trying to honor Tim in the weirdest way possible. And because we don't have the history with the Pre-New 52, I don't think it's justified. And again, it's also her story being driven by Tim's story, which I think Stephanie past that. And if it wasn't for her past of her dying and her being Robyn because of Tim and then dying, you know, if it wasn't for that story, I'd be like, all right, I feel, you know, her being driven by Tim and her pain is okay. But because she has that past, I think it's weird to redo it. You know, she's definitely had stronger aspects in her history than that. So, yeah. It's weird, and that's why I'm so torn on it. There's aspects of Stephanie that's there, and that's very much in Stephanie's character, but the thing she's fighting for doesn't quite make sense to me. So, Detective Comics is not a bad issue. It's good art. There are interesting ideas brought up in it. I like the ending, but I'm so torn on Stephanie right here, as a humongous fan of Stephanie. So, Detective Comics issue 947 gets 3 stars. As you can see, I had a lot to say about that. Moving on to number 13, a book that I'm sad that this is the end of the arc, because it was like kind of slow until the end. And that's Snotgirl issue 5, which kind of does the same thing it's been doing until it ends, where you go and dig into the mystery of Cool Girl having blood on her head. And then you have, I forget her name. It's not, is it Generic Girl? It's her, like, arch enemy right now. Trying to see what her name is. Anyways, she is trying to be helpful to Snotgirl, and Snotgirl kills her by accident. So, I love that she's not a trustworthy narrator. I think that's the most interesting part of this book, but I want them to highlight that more. The rest of it was some, you know, very repetitive themes we've already seen with the character until we get to the end, and now we have to wait a couple of months until we get the next issue. But Snotgirl issue 5 gets 3 stars. Not a bad issue, definitely picks up towards the end. Alright, so moving on now to number 12, which is SpiderMan issue 11. A bit of a filler issue, but a good filler issue. Learning more about Miles' father and what he would do as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And now we do get a little bit more with Miles' mother, that she's worried about her husband, and hopefully she finds out about Miles and her husband soon, because that's kind of what was building up in this issue. And I really liked the artwork. I thought the art was good. Fit the story very well. So overall I gave it 3.5 stars. Was it a filler issue? Yes, but it's cool to learn a little bit more about Miles' father and his new days as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Moving on to number 11, which is Batgirl issue 6, which was just a fun issue. I think it is Albuquerque's last issue, so I'm definitely going to miss his art style on this book. But it's Poison Ivy and Batgirl teaming up to try to defeat this plant on a plane. It's Batgirl kind of moving on to her new life and leaving, you know, what she learned. Or not even leaving what she learned, just knowing that she learned something with this trip, and now going back to Burnside and becoming a better Batgirl. Was it a filler issue? Totally, yes. But was it a fun issue? Yeah, I enjoyed it. So I'm going to give Batgirl issue 6 3.5 stars. If you like Poison Ivy, you want a fun story, read this issue. If you have too many issues or too many books on your pull list, it's not a totally necessary issue to read, though. Alright, moving on to number 10. Glad to see this a bit higher, and that is Tomboy issue 9. Do I still feel like there's a lot of characters in this book? Yes, I think that's definitely a negative of this book. Kind of wish it was more in the point of view of our main hero. But we learn a bit more of our powers of our main hero, her bloodline, and why she's doing these things, which I thought was very necessary, very much needed for this story. So I like it. I like the artwork a lot. And yeah, it was great just to learn more about the mythology of tomboys. So, Tomboy issue 9 gets 3.5 stars. But I do think there are some stories I wasn't as interested in. I do think they should just focus on the main character a bit more. Alright, so now moving on to number 9, which is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 10, which is kind of a side story about Billy and his heroism, which I didn't know we were going to get into this. I thought we were going to continue more about the White Ranger arc. So I thought it was weird that they kind of took a sidestep, but still a very well done character-driven issue. Really like the art style. It's a bit different, but I thought this art style was a bit cleaner than what we've been getting in the past. Still love the coloring for this book. I actually like this art style more than art that we've been getting, but yeah, I like this book. Learning about Billy and what makes him a hero, and his friends saying, hey, you don't need to, not be scared. It's okay to be scared. If you want to wear your Power Ranger suit under your civvies, do it. No one's judging you. So it's really celebrating Billy's character. And if you're a big Blue Ranger fan, I think you'll enjoy this. So the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 10 gets 3.5 stars. Now moving on to number 8. I think some of you guys are going to be surprised that this is higher, but I'm not reviewing this as an overall event. I'm reviewing it as an issue. And as an issue, I like Civil War II issue 8. Do I think the delays affect this a lot? Hell yeah. Is this a great event? No. But I like the ending. I like that we get to see some of the future of the Marvel Universe. And that Tony's not dead and he is doing some chemical thing on him, I thought was interesting. In the artwork. The artwork is what really brought it up. I thought this was some of the best art we've seen from Marquez in this series, especially with the battle. I thought it was really beautiful. So, was this a perfect issue? No. But I did like a lot of the stuff that came with this issue. I thought it was interesting with Ulysses' story that he's becoming not exactly the Watcher, but at least in that vein of the Watcher, or a higher being, it looks like. We don't know his full story until we get it, but I like that. So it actually brings in some other stories, like Original Sin, into this book, because you do have the Watcher story coming in. So, and then you get to see these potential futures, I thought was cool. So I thought it was an interesting book to see the next chapter of the Marvel Universe. So that is the reason I gave it 4 stars. I'm not ranking this as the total arc of Civil War II, but just as the issue of Civil War II. Alright, so now moving on to number 7, book I was really surprised by, and I'm this whole series I've been surprised by, and that's Teen Titans issue 3. I really like this issue, because I think Ben Percy really gets Damian's character, and Damian, you feel bad for him, but he's still his character, he still doesn't know how to be a kid, he doesn't really know how to be a person, and he's learning, and I like that even though this is a Damian-centric issue, it doesn't take away anything from the other characters. It's still this team building of learning about these characters, what makes them different, what makes them similar, and you're really seeing this team form, and it's honestly one of the best team-forming books I've seen in a long time, because a lot of times with teams, I feel that they're just forced together, and sometimes they just don't make the chemistry that they should. But here it's about building up chemistry. It's about creating this team and Damian as a leader. I like it, and I think bringing in Ra's al Ghul as the main villain for the first arc was really smart. The only, I guess, nitpick I had is I do miss the old artist. I feel like Damian kind of has a baby face in a lot of these pages. I don't know why, but I know he's like a kid, but he has like a real baby face in some of these pages. But other than that, that's a small nitpick. But I liked it. I thought it was a solid issue. So I'm going to give Teen Titans issue 3 4 stars. Now moving on to number 6, another title that's been kind of lower, but definitely impressed me with this last issue for the arc, and that is Titans issue 6. Very close to being in my top 5, obviously, and I had a debate, is it number 5, is it number 6, but I did end up making it number 6. Some of the artwork, the backgrounds could have been more detailed. I guess that's my only complaint, is that the backgrounds were really plain in this book, but the story, I liked it as a Wally story, but also celebrating the Titans team, which I think has been really missing with this book, that's focused so much on Wally's story that I kind of forgot about the other team members when this book is called Titans. But with this issue, it's Wally remembering the Linda he had, and knowing that he's going to have to start from the beginning with Linda to create a new relationship, and to be patient, which is a big word for Wally, and remembering that he does have still have a lightning rod, which is his friends, and I really like that concept, and I thought it was a good ending to a kind of long-winded arc, but now we're getting into Titans Tower, and hopefully just building on the Titans team now. But I thought it was a good last issue for this arc. So Titans issue 6 gets 4 stars. That was number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Grimm Fairy Tales issue 1. I was really surprised by this book because if you read the original Grimm Fairy Tales, it was just kind of one-shot stories of, you know, kind of making the fairy tales we know a little bit more horrific. And what I liked about this is it focused on Red Riding Hood, or at least the origin of her story a little bit, and I love that character. Definitely my favorite character of the Zenescope universe. But what I like here is the artwork, first of all, is so gritty, and it works. It works so well. But I like that it kind of gives a twist of the werewolf story we know, because you have this blonde girl, she reminds you of the Red Riding Hood. You know, I'm pretty sure her last name is very similar to Brittany's last name. And we find out that there's more than one werewolf. There's a nice twist in the end, which I think Zenescope is very known for with these type of titles. So I like that, and I hope we get to see this character more of who the actual werewolf was. It was a really solid book, and it honors what Grimm Fairy Tales was with telling a new story. So I gave this a solid 4 stars, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the series goes. And yeah, so issue 1 was really good. Moving on to number 4. Which is Love is Love, issue 1. I would have gotten this printed, but my store did not have it. I did get it off Comixology. Definitely support this book if you can, because it goes to a good cause. It goes to the victims of the Orlando shooting, and yeah, I really enjoyed this because we get to see these writers and artists really put their heart and soul into these one-page stories. And usually I don't like anthology books, but I think with every story there's, again, so much heart put into it. So definitely get this book. I enjoyed it, and I say either leave it to last or leave it to first. Just really give your individual attention to Love is Love, issue 1. So that's my number 4 pick. Moving on to number 3, which is Spider-Woman, issue 14. And I thought this dealt with Jessica's grief very well, where she finds out that Roger loved her, and she finds out through really the words of her of his ex-wife, and finding out that Roger was spending more time with her than he was with his family. So Jessica definitely feels guilty, but I love especially the first page where she's just taking a shower and all this grief goes into her head, and Jessica still has to be strong. She still has to do her daily life when her best friend dies, and her having to maybe reevaluate what her relationship was with Roger, and then still having to deal with the mystery of who's dressed up in his suit. Is Roger still alive? Like, what was he doing before he died? So I thought it highlighted, and also I think I forgot to, sorry, let me finish this thought and I'll go into other thought. Anyways, Spider-Woman, I think, had a great mystery in this issue, which usually has some interesting mysteries because it is still an investigation book, and also just some great ways to show grief. So I gave this issue 4.5 stars, really enjoyed this, and can't wait to see where it goes. What I was going to mention, I think I said Love is Love, issue 1 had 4 stars, it was a 4.5 star book. If I didn't mention that, it's 4.5 stars. There's a lot of great 4.5 star books that came out this week, which is great. Alright, moving on to number 2, which is Hulk, issue 1. Love this book. If you're a She-Hulk fan, I think you're going to really enjoy this because it goes back to her roots, which if you didn't read Sensational She-Hulk, which was like her first book, then, or at least just the older stuff of her stories, it did a good balance between her being Jen Walters the human and Jen Walters the She-Hulk. And here it's Jen figuring a darker side of the Hulk, the anger, the trauma that she has to deal with that she's not. And it kind of goes back to her being less confident, which I thought is interesting because we haven't seen that with this character in a long time, and the trauma brings this out of her, the old Jen Walters, and I like that. I like seeing the human side of Jen. I want to see that more. It goes back to her roots, and then even like the plain Jane type artwork works for this book because she's always a plain Jane type character, but then having those nice shades of green throughout almost every panel was so great. Even though this is a slower issue, it's about Jen going through the day, I guess, the days of the normal days of her life as she's dealing with trauma. So I really enjoyed this issue. I guess my only nitpick was towards the main case. I like it, but I don't know where it's going with this person who doesn't want to get evicted from her house. But Hulk issue 1 for me was a great start, and I can't wait to read more of this. I thought it was great, going back to Jen's roots. So I gave that 4.5 stars. Moving on to number 1, which was Supergirl being super. This blew me away. I love this book. It's probably one of the best stories I've read in a really long time. Or at least one of the best stories I've read this year. One of the best Supergirl stories I've read definitely in a long time. Because I just haven't been liking the New 52 and the DC Rebirth stories for Supergirl. I don't think it really brings the essence out of who Supergirl is. And here, we do. It celebrates Kara by just being Kara. It celebrates her origins because her origins are so connected to Krypton, or, remembering Krypton that, Superman never did, or her coming to Earth because she was trying to show Clark, show Kal-El what Krypton was. She was there always for Clark, and I like that this story, it takes that away. She doesn't remember Krypton. She doesn't know who Superman is. She doesn't even know she's an alien. It deals with a coming-of-age story. It's a true modern story for Supergirl. And even her friends are really well developed in this book. Then you have that cliffhanger of an earthquake. You don't know who survives. Is she going to have to be the hero that she's meant to be? The artwork's beautiful by Joelle Jones, really bringing that teen aspect we need from the book, even with the fashion, with technology in this book. I just loved it. I love Kara's personality here. And yeah, it's just such a great coming-of-age story. I loved it. Her coming into her superpowers, her dealing with hormones. It's really this whole story of her being an alien, but showing an exaggerated story of how alien we feel as teens. And I also really like that she compares herself to her other friends, thinking, well, everyone else has their life and knows what they want with their life, and I don't know who I am. And I think that's always a question that every coming-of-age story should have. So it's just such a great story that celebrates Kara, and just Kara being Kara, not attached to any other legacy but her own. So, love this book. I gave it 5 stars. Read Supergirl being super. It was really well done. I can't wait for book 2. I know it comes out in February, but I don't mind because we're going to get like 50 pages of story, which is great. So, that is the show. Let me know in the comments below what was your worst pick of the week, what was your pick of the week, and everything in between. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Frontline. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there are links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. I'll see you guys later. Bye.